Hello, my name is Janine Bensouda, and today I'd like to tell you my story. I have 3 children. The third is an angel. My oldest is 15 years old and my daughter is 12. And my second son, Muhammad, was actually stillborn. So let me tell you about how that happened. This was 10 years ago, actually, in 2011. I had had a very normal pregnancy, was completely healthy, and since it was my third child, I was already very familiar with the pregnancy experience. The only difference was that this time I had 2 kids and there was a little more stress in my life. So, we had a couple of incidents when actually my daughter, who at that time was a year and a half, she had febrile convulsions, which is very scary to see in a little toddler because basically they're going through convulsions, and that looks very scary. They froth at the mouth and everything, but it's something that goes away. So as a result of that, I did have a couple of very scary experiences during my pregnancy for my third child. Anyway, everything went well. We got through the 20 weeks. We found out that he was a boy. We were all very excited to welcome him into the world. We got to month 6. We got to month 7, and everything was going great. Now, at 7.5 months, that's when one day, just like out of nowhere, at night, I went to bed and I actually fell asleep, and suddenly in the middle of the night, like out of nowhere, I screamed and I felt this really strange sensation in my stomach. And I just knew something bad happened. And I remember telling my husband at the time, something's not okay. And he asked me to calm down. He reassured me in the morning we would sort it out and check with the doctor. So the morning came and, I was looking and I was feeling a bit of movement, but it was kind of like sluggish. And so I did all the usual things they tell you to do: drink something sweet, move about a bit, make some noise, move around. And, that was kind of motivating him to move a bit, but I just felt something was wrong. So we called up the hospital, we called up the doctor, and it was a day off, so she wasn't available. She said, look, just do this and do that and keep your eye on it. And if it persists, then call me back later. So about 3 hours later on, now it was about 2:00 in the afternoon, and I was not feeling okay. I just knew something was wrong. So finally, I insisted that we go to the hospital. So we go to the hospital, and when we arrive there, they take us in first of all, the on-duty doctor comes and uses the stethoscope to try to listen in for a heartbeat. And the doctor couldn't find his heartbeat at that time. And in fact, every time she thought she found it, she'd realize it was my heartbeat. But because I was so nervous, my heart was beating so fast, it was confusing. Then they said, all right, we're going to have to call the doctor and do an actual scan, So they called the doctor, and the doctor came in, and unfortunately, when she came in and she checked me out, she confirmed that my baby had passed away. And at that time, there was no way for her to know why or how the baby had passed. All she could tell us was that there was no heartbeat, and therefore the baby was not alive. I remember sitting there thinking, I can't even understand the information that she's giving me. I mean, I was ginormous at that stage, and my job puts me in front of a lot of people. I was doing training and workshop for literally hundreds of people, and everybody was expecting me to have this big, like, it was like public knowledge, and I couldn't believe what she was saying. And even my husband at the time, he said, this is not true, this can't be true, you'll see, he'll be fine. And then she said something that I could never understand. At that time, she said, okay, go back home. We're going to give you some Pitocin. We're going to apply some Pitocin, which will accelerate the contractions, and then come back in when you start to go into labor. And if you can just imagine at that time, you're like, I don't even understand what you're talking about. And now you're telling me to go home and to wait when my baby has passed. And I remember just thinking, my womb has become a tomb. And my baby is, and you're telling me to go home and then do what? And when anyway, she spoke to my husband, and next thing I know, we're in the car and we're going home. At this point, I was making phone calls to my mother, my family, trying to figure out work, because I was supposed to be training people the next day, and we had to make alternative arrangements. It was just, I was operating from a position of complete and utter just transactional mode, right? What needs to be done. I remember getting home, not knowing who anybody was, not understanding what was going on, going in to have a bath and sitting in the bath and trying to understand what was happening. So confusing. Anyway, the next morning I went into labor, and I was familiar with labor, having had 2 kids already, but of course I had no experience with what was about to hit me. That horrible sense of the finality of everything, that I was going to be going through a natural labor, and the conclusion was already cast in stone. We got to the hospital, and of course that was just awful, because you're arriving at the hospital and you go to the maternity ward, everybody sees you and they're all excited and people are wishing you, and you're just crying. And when we got in, they asked me whether I wanted to get an epidural, or I said, no, I want to feel everything. And so I chose that because I felt it was the only way that I could really connect with my baby before having to say goodbye to him forever. They also asked me whether I wanted to hold him after he was delivered. And apparently some mothers choose not to. But they recommended that I do, because they said it can help with the finality and conclusion of it. And I chose to take him in my arms, and I'm so glad that I did that. Because the next couple of hours with the delivery, it was just absolutely horrible. My mother was there with me. I'm glad I had her there. She held my hand. She helped me through it, because at some points and then I just stopped breathing, because I just felt like I couldn't breathe anymore. She was the one who reminded me we had to get through this for the other 2 kids. So after we delivered him and they placed him on my chest, that was possibly the most confusing moment. It was so tragic, but it was also so magical. I just loved feeling him on me for that one last time. And then they took him away and they prepared him, because as a Muslim, we bury our deceased as soon as possible. So we had to get the paperwork done and can you imagine dealing with all of that when you've just gone through this name and all the details and all that? Anyway, we had one night with him. They had him wrapped up and he was in a crib near our bed. And we all had a chance to pray for him and pray on him and say our goodbyes. And then the next day, we got ready to take him to the cemetery. And I remember a nurse did come in, and they gave me some medicine to slow down the milk production. And because of course, the one thing you don't realize is, even though your child has passed away, but your breasts are still producing milk. And that was really sad. The biggest thing that hit me as far as an emotion after they took him away and after he was buried, when I got home, I felt this huge sense of emptiness, like a physical emptiness in my chest, as if my chest was concave. I remember feeling that, as if it was expecting me to be hugging and nursing a child, and that child wasn't there, and so there was this big gaping hole. It was a crazy sensation. I didn't know how to explain it except like that. Luckily, I had a lot of support from my family, but the big thing that hit me was the community, I was so shocked about the responses. So I lived in Dubai in the United Arab Emirates, and it's mainly a Muslim community, and there are a lot of Arabs there. And I guess what I wasn't expecting was how the women would respond. They said things like, oh, sorry, but don't worry about it. You can always have another one. And, oh, well, it's God's will, so, it's probably for the best. You never know. Maybe he was going to grow up and be somebody evil or do something bad. I just didn't know how to digest that information. I didn't find it useful at all. It hurt me, it upset me, and it confused me because I am a believer. I do have faith. I do accept God's will, but it hurts. And he's a human being and he died. And it's not like you can just brush it under the carpet. And I felt so unhappy, and I was searching and searching for support groups and for anybody to talk to who had gone through the same thing. I couldn't find anything in that area. The closest support groups I could find were in the UK, imagine, and I was in Dubai. And I felt so alone. And that's one of the reasons that I created that video I did, that I put on my Instagram, to really speak up and speak out for other women and kind of invite any woman who had a short story to tell and share and felt like she didn't have a voice or she couldn't express it. I wanted to be there for her, and I still want to be there for any woman out there. If it's you and you've gone through this and you just want someone to listen to you, I'm here for you. I promise you that, because no woman should have to go through this alone. I felt guilty, like I was responsible. My womb had become a tomb for my baby. I felt like it was my fault. Maybe I did something, maybe I was under too much stress. I felt angry. Shortly after that, my marriage deteriorated and eventually ended up in a divorce because we just couldn't get through that. And we responded differently, and we had challenges before that, but this just was kind of the last straw. And the other thing was that, your body, what it's going through, you're still bleeding, you're still lactating, you're having all kinds of cramps, and it's just very confusing. And I didn't feel like I was prepared well enough, that it was explained to me well enough, that there was enough support or nurturing for me. So I just felt very alone and confused. And later on, I never got my period back. And I was 38 when I had my son and lost him, and I never got my period back after that. Ever again. That was it. And I never went through a proper menopause, so I have no idea what happened with that, but that's just the way it ended. Little by little, I started to seek help, meditate. What really helped me get out of this was sport. Because I felt like I was going into a depression. It was very difficult for me to get out of bed. But I was running a business, so I had to. And so what I did one day, in my mind, I kept saying, I wish I could run away from it all. I wish I could run away from it all. One day I just said, I need to change these thoughts and I need to change this language. But it has to be something credible. I can't just forget. So I said, all right, let me just cut off a couple of words from that sentence and say, I wish I could just run. So I put on a pair of shoes, and when I would take my son to his soccer practice, I would go running around the soccer field. And running around the soccer field really helped me. After running, the endorphins and the dopamine, all those positive chemicals in my brain made me feel good. And I did more and more of it. Eventually what happened was I ended up joining a running club. I ended up competing in 5-kilometer races, and then 10-kilometer races, and then half marathon races, and then marathons, and then I actually moved into Ironman and triathlon a few years later. But it was really the sport and my kids that helped me get out of the depression and the misery that I felt. Just to conclude this, I would say that I have accepted the death of my son. I remember him always. I do say I have 3 children. One of them is an angel. And he's buried. We celebrate his birthday every year by remembering him and praying for him and doing something nice. The kids know all about him, and we go to the cemetery. And I've used my voice now to represent those who feel they don't have a voice, and to encourage other women to speak up, to speak out, to be just honest and authentic about how they're feeling, and to know that they're not alone. You're not alone. Thank you very much. I hope that my story was helpful.